I would like to introduce our Caddo descendant who's here to represent the Caddo. We have Clifford Ah-in-nist, Sipes, and he's the coordinator of training and technical assistance for the University of Oklahoma, educational training, evaluation, assessment, and measurement at the College of Continuing Education. He's also the coordinator of youth involvement and trainer for the National Center on the Sexual Behavior of Youth under the Center for Child Abuse and Neglect at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. So he specializes in training crisis intervention, crisis responses, de-escalation to law enforcement and military, and topics related to children and youth mental health, suicide prevention, postvention, and problematic sexual behavior. He's an expert in youth voice and focuses on youth voice leading policy changes at best practices. And Clifford is also the creator, advisor, and facilitator of several youth advisories, the latest being Our Voice, a student organization that advocates for the mental and emotional well-being for students on the Norman OU campus. The other being the Youth Partnership Board, a youth advisory that is dedicated to improving juvenile justice interventions of youth with illegal sexual behaviors. Ah-in-nist is Cheyenne and Caddo with family ties to both Oklahoma and Montana. So you can see this ties in really well with our next section with Noreen Starr, and we're so grateful to have you and hear your words, so thank you for being here.
Lori Lee, Associate Professor of Humanities, Flagler College, yields the podium to Ah-in-nist Sipes, descendant of prominent man, Caddo tribe member.
Thank you. I don't know where that bio came from because it sounded like I was about to give a presentation for my job. So I'm going to say a few things before I dive into what I want to say. The first one is on the agenda, it says that lunch is right now. And growing up, going to Stomp Dance on the Caddo grounds, they would serve dinner and then they'd come up and say the prayer. And those prayers would last 45 minutes and an hour. And so we're going to do this that way. So I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful to talk about this. I was invited to come here today to speak about prominent man who is the one Caddo captive that was here. But I'm also a descendant of two other Cheyenne captives that were here. So I'm going to introduce myself and do my lineage, but before then I'd like to honor and to acknowledge the other tribes that are here, the first one being the Comanches. There's a quick story of, there was a young man who I believe was Mexican, who was taken in and adopted by the Comanche tribe. And then somehow he ended up with the Southern Cheyennes. He then went with the group that broke out and went north and ended up with the Northern Cheyennes. They asked who he was and he married in, and the son's name ended up being Mexican Cheyenne. And that Mexican Cheyenne family is still there, and one of them became one of my mentors when I spent 4 years in Lame Deer, and so that will always be a part of my heart, and so I'm grateful for the Comanche Nation because of that lineage. The other one is the Kiowa tribe is here. The Cheyennes went to war with the Kiowas at the Battle of Wolf Creek. My great-great-great-grandfather, who was the first Iron Shirt, fought in that battle and had a cut right here. And then afterwards, they said, all right, we're done fighting. And the fight ended. And then shortly thereafter, the great peace between the Kiowas and the Cheyenne and Arapahoes was made. And since that peace, we've been allies. The other being the Arapahoes. One of my favorite stories about the Arapahoes, the Cheyenne word for what the Cheyennes called the Arapahoes was the cloud people. There was a group of the cloud people that were tempted by the U.S. government and the cavalry, and they said, we'll give you all this money and all these horses and all of these supplies if you betray the Cheyenne. And the response from this group of Arapahoes said, we have lived together for many generations. We have lived together, fought together, died together, married together, raised our children together for many generations. Why would we stop now? And because of that integrity, they were killed because of that. And so I will always remember that, and always I want to honor and to acknowledge those things.
Ah-in-nist rubs his wedding ring.
Now, I want to say for the Caddo side, I'm here to share a story about that. It was mentioned earlier that you know some people fought and all those things. Before contact, Oklahoma was Caddo land. Today, it's still Caddo land. And on behalf of the Caddos, everyone is welcome to be here.
He grins at the audience.
So Clifford is the name I go by professionally. My real name is Ah-in-nist. I am blessed that my parents made the legal name, and the name that I go by and have always gone by is my Cheyenne name, Ah-in-nist. I'm so grateful because of that. When I was much younger, I did not like that. I was made fun of. I hated it. But now I'm so grateful because of that. I'd like to give my lineage on my Cheyenne side first. So my name is Anhos, which translates to red-tailed hawk, which would mean the color red of thunder, the creator, which could be the thunderbird, which is the red-tailed hawk. I'm the son of Chief John L. Sipes Jr., who his name was also Anhos, and he was the fifth. I am the sixth. He was the fifth. He was named after his uncle, and that name traces back to the Cheyenne prophet Erect Horns. His mother was Cleo Wilson, and her name was Mokina, which translates to red feather girl or red feather woman. Her mother was Maddie Standing Bird, and through marriage, I'm related to the Romanos family, so I'm also grateful that they're here as well. Her Cheyenne name was Amaneta, which means living woman. And I want you to listen to this for a second. Living woman was the daughter of Measure Woman, who survived the massacre of Black Kettle. She was shot in the hip, and her father was Medicine Water, who was held captive at Fort Marion. Her mother is Mookie, which translates to Buffalo Calf Woman, who was held captive at Fort Marion. And they chose to name their daughter and granddaughter Living Woman. Survived massacres, survived battles, and they chose the name Living Woman to be full of life. Medicine Waters, his father is Motameyamut, which translates to comes out new, and his mother was Killer Woman. I'm so grateful that I get to be able to do that and to share that. I'm grateful that that's the line that I come from on my Cheyenne side. On my Caddo side,
Ah-in-nist turns a page of his notes.
My mother is Dolores Sabia Bigfoot. Her mother is Pauline Sabia Dunlap. Her mother is Julie Edge. Julie Edge was the daughter of Pauline Washington. Pauline Washington was the daughter of Joe Washington. Joe Washington is the son of Caddo George Washington. Caddo George Washington was, what we believe, the brother of Prominent Man who was held captive at Fort Marion. Julie Washington and Pauline Washington called Prominent Man grandfather. And so that's who I am. That's my connection to this. I'm grateful that I get to share this with you, to share this information. Just as an example of some of the things that I want to share before I get into this family story is the Romanos family. I was so impressed that the things that they shared was that Henry Romanos came out of that event saying that education was important. Education is important. And that entire line, it showed they went to college, they graduated, and the things that they were able to accomplish. Medicine Water and Mookie, but Medicine Water in particular, came out of that encounter and said, we need to keep fighting. He was known that he would tear down fences everywhere he could. He was a menace that he would tear down fences and posts, and he would he smelt bad because he would wear his buckskin shirt, his war shirt that had scalps on it, that the fight continued. And I thought that was really interesting that two people in the same situation had two different responses to their incarceration here. Mookie, she became a suicide soldier with Medicine Water. The only way you do that is if you lose your family. She survived Sand Creek and met Medicine Water, and they rode and fought together. She was the only woman that was incarcerated here at Fort Marion. And one of the things I wanted to mention was I'm so grateful of the female ledger artists that were up here and talked about the things that they said they weren't allowed to do or talk about, and the sexism that came from the European has been brought into our culture, because Mookie was a society sister and a warrior, and was, when she died, quote, in our family history, buried with all rights, privileges, and honors and blessings that befit a Cheyenne warrior. And I'm so grateful because of that to her, and for them leading that example that continues today. I'll stop there, and I'll shift over to the information when I'm here, and I'm sorry for taking up time. I know everyone's hungry. I believe that the most important people in this room are Noreen's granddaughter and the young man that was sitting up here, because they're the youngest descendants in here. They're the most important people here. the most important ones here. And I asked, and one of the words that they said was, when they went to the fort and they've heard these things, don't fully understand, but I feel something. I feel its heaviness. And for me, I remember my parents brought me here when I was little, and I felt the heaviness, but I did not understand. I saw them cry. I did not understand. Came here again when I was a teenager, and they cried, and I did not understand, but I felt the heaviness. Later on, we'd go up to the Peabody Museum and see the masks and the busts that were made, and they cried, and I began to understand. Last year, I got to see the masks and the busts that were made that are currently at the Smithsonian, and I cried. And I think I fully understood then of what it meant. And so with that in mind, I'm so grateful that these young people are here, that these young descendants who are younger than me, they're the most important ones in the room. And I'm glad you feel that. And over time, the understanding will come, but you are the most important people in the room. So here's the information I'd like to share with you. Fort Marion has always been a part of my life. It has always been a part of my father's life. He studied it, has visited this place many, many, many times, has always come, has always been trying to do this work. So I was grateful to grow up around it. As I said, I did not know before. In 2007, we were invited to go up to the Peabody Museum at Harvard and see the masks and see the busts that were made, see the masks that were made of them. But the context behind the story, and this is the family story I wish to share with you. I have 3 little children, little children, who are little. My mother has bad hips and bad knees and will pick them up and hold them. And when they ask for something, she gets down on her hands and knees and they'll climb up on her back and they'll grab it off the counter. My grandmother had rheumatoid arthritis and had bad hips and bad knees. And we would say, Grandma, I want to get something off the counter. And she would get down on her hands and knees and I'd climb up on her back and grab it. And she wouldn't just grab it. And looking back now, I think of the immense pain and harm that caused her, but she did it. And my mother said that her grandmother did that for her. My grandmother said that her grandmother or her grandmother and grandfather did that for her. But this immense love that they had, that instead of just grabbing it, it was important for them to get on their hands and knees and for them to crawl up on their back. It was always like that. My older sister, and here's the story, my older sister, whenever she was born with a cleft lip and a cleft palate. And whenever my mother took her to see her grandmother, Julie Edge, Julie's response was, oh, she's perfect, she's beautiful, we absolutely love her, there's nothing wrong with her. And they took her around to all the elders and they kissed her and they loved her. They said, she's perfect, she's beautiful, there's nothing wrong with her. Then my mother had to take her to take her to the hospital to start having surgeries to get the cleft palate and cleft lip repaired. And the response from this grandmother said, why? There's nothing wrong with her. There's nothing wrong with her. Why? You don't need to do this. There's nothing wrong. And became very, very, very upset. During this process, the part of this story which I think is important to tell is that my mother put my sister in her car seat in the bedroom, was getting the car ready, and as she was walking out, she left my sister alone in the back bedroom, and the grandmother goes, why'd you leave that baby alone? The spirits are going to think that you don't want her, and they're going to come back and get her. You don't leave babies alone. And so my mother went back and picked her up and was just crying, putting the car away. But she was very adamant that there's nothing wrong with this grandchild. And they were all that way. Later on, years later, after Julie Edge had returned to her people and had gone back into the earth, in 2007, the first time we got to see the masks, we got to see them, and it was jarring, it was painful, but we went to go see the Caddo. And what we saw on him was he had a cleft lip and a cleft palate. And when he returned from Fort Marion, guess who was a little girl in the home where he was? Guess who called him grandfather? Julie Edge called him grandfather. And he would get down on his hands and knees, and she would crawl up on his back to get things, and he would carry her. And so this love that this grandmother had for a child that was born different, with a challenge that made this life different, That's the family story. That's what the Caddo Nation and the Caddo teachings about children have brought to this. This is who we are. And I know that the feelings and beliefs about children are not unique to just the Caddo Nation, but these beliefs about them, this is what we want to share. All the pain, there's a lot of pain, yes. There's a lot of trauma, yes. There's also a lot of hope. There's a lot of joy. There's a lot of peace. And it should be centered around our children, because remember, who's the most important people in this room? It's the youngest ones. And so that's my family story. I hope it means a lot to me. I hope it means something to you. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful to represent the Caddo Nation in doing this. I'm proud to be Caddo. I'm proud to be Cheyenne. Thank you for allowing me to do this. I want to say thank you especially to the institutions that are here. I remember growing up, my father visiting institutions and was met with alienation and rejection. And so I'm grateful that you have accepted this with humility and grace and have become true partners. So thank you so much, because it has not always been that way. So thank you for allowing us to do this. So thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Ah-in-nist collects his notes and returns to the long panelist table while the audience applauds.